The long, slow sunset was painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple, a sight I never tired of after years of city life. This was my peace, earned through decades of work. The only sounds were the gentle lowing of my two horses, Athena and Hera, in their paddock, and the distant chirp of crickets beginning their evening song. I was on my porch, a warm mug of coffee in my hands, savoring the cool breeze that swept across the fields. This was the whole point of buying the ranch: quiet, solitude, and space to breathe. That's when the silence was fractured. First, it was a faint, shimmering glow against the gathering dusk, a sickly, rhythmic pulse of red and blue that grew brighter. Then came the sound, the low, guttural rumble of heavy engines, the crunch of tires grinding deliberately over the loose gravel of my long driveway. That Saturday evening, 3 county patrol cars processed in a slow, ominous caravan toward my home. Their sirens were mute, but the silent assertion of their presence was a shout in the twilight. My back straightened. This wasn't a casual visit. I set my clay mug down on the weathered wooden railing of the porch, the thud of it a definitive full stop to my peace. Each step I took toward them was measured, my boots crunching a steady, deliberate rhythm against the stone path I'd laid with my own hands. The lead officer, a man with a seasoned face and a gaze that missed nothing, detached himself from the driver's side of the first car. His posture was deceptively casual, but his right hand rested on his utility belt. It was a carefully calculated placement, not on his weapon, but close enough to it to communicate a clear, unspoken message. This was a situation he controlled. Evening. "Sir," he said, his voice a level, professional baritone. "We received a 911 call reporting suspicious activity and a possible trespasser refusing to leave these premises. We'll need to see some identification, please." I moved with deliberate, unhurried slowness, keeping my hands open and visible as I reached for the worn leather wallet in my back pocket. The cool evening air felt suddenly sharper. "Officer, my name is Marcus Chen. I am the owner of this property." I handed him my driver's license, the plastic card feeling flimsy in the face of such officialdom. "May I ask who specifically made the call?" He flipped open a small, spiral-bound notepad, the kind I hadn't seen in years. The caller identified herself as a Karen Whitfield, president of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association. He looked up from his notes, his eyes meeting mine. She stated that an unauthorized person was occupying the property and was hostile. A faint, wry smile tugged at the corners of my lips, a reaction I didn't bother to suppress. Karen Whitfield, of course. I knew the name, the face, the entire exhausting personality. But she, in her boundless confidence, had no clue about my identity. The pieces of this absurd puzzle were clicking into place with a satisfying finality. This was about to become very, very interesting for her. "Officer," I said, my voice calm and even, "I purchased this ranch and all 60 acres 6 months ago. The deed, the mortgage paperwork, the tax records, it's all inside, and you are welcome to review it. And just so we are perfectly unequivocally clear," I continued, gesturing with my chin toward the distant manicured lines of the Willowbrook community, "this property's western fence line is a full half-mile outside the Willowbrook HOA's legal boundary. They have no jurisdiction here, none. This confrontation had been brewing, a storm building on the horizon for 2 weeks. It had begun on a perfectly serene Sunday morning. I'd been reading the paper on this very porch when the aggressive rat-a-tat-tat of knuckles on my front door shattered the calm. I opened it to find a woman who seemed to be the physical manifestation of a complaint form. She was in her early 50s, dressed in a sharply tailored blazer that looked profoundly out of place in the ranch's dusty warmth. Her highlighted blonde hair was sculpted into that specific, helmet-like bob I privately called the suburban shield. She clutched a clipboard not like a tool, but like a weapon, a scepter of her self-proclaimed authority. "I'm Karen Whitfield, president of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association," she declared, bypassing any greeting. Her eyes, sharp and calculating behind her designer frames, scanned the porch behind me with visible disdain. "We need to discuss your numerous violations." I leaned casually against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Violations? I'm afraid there's been a mistake. This property isn't and has never been part of any homeowners association. Her lips tightened into a thin, bloodless line. That's where you're mistaken. The Willowbrook HOA has recently voted to expand its jurisdiction to include all properties within a 1-mile radius of our community's borders. It's for community cohesion and safety. You'll need to register your property immediately and bring everything up to code. I maintained a patient, almost weary tone. Ms. Whitfield, with all due respect, that's not how property law or HOAs work. You can't just unilaterally decide to extend your authority over land that wasn't part of your original covenant. This is a private, deeded property. Ignoring me completely, she thrust a thick stack of papers toward my chest. These are your initial violation notices. Your perimeter fence is painted in a non-approved rustic brown. It must be repainted in one of the 3 approved HOA shades: Desert Dawn, Adobe Dust, or Mission White. You have 2 unregistered livestock, horses, I assume, which constitutes unauthorized livestock. And that barn, she said, her voice dripping with contempt as she gestured toward my perfectly maintained, century-old structure. Don't even get me started on that barn. The siding is incorrect and the roof is the wrong material. You have 30 days to comply or begin accruing daily fines. I let my hands remain at my sides, refusing to take the papers. They fluttered slightly in the breeze between us. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave now. You are on private property, and you have no legal or contractual authority here whatsoever. Her face flushed an immediate mottled red. The composure cracked, revealing the fury beneath. We'll see about that. I know people, important people. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. You won't find it so easy to ignore them. With that, she spun on her heel, her low heels digging into the gravel as she marched back to her pristine white SUV. After her car disappeared in a cloud of indignant dust, I did what any prudent man would do. I went inside and called a security company. Within 48 hours, my property was outfitted with a comprehensive, state-of-the-art surveillance system. High-definition cameras with night vision and audio recording were discreetly mounted at every gate, along the fence line, and on the house itself. Something in her entitled glare told me I wasn't dealing with rationality. I was dealing with a zealot, and zealots, in my experience, needed to be documented. My instinct was tragically correct. The harassment began almost immediately. The next morning, a laminated violation notice was tacked to my main gate, citing my unapproved wildflower meadow as a public nuisance. My mailbox began to fill with bogus official letters from the Willowbrook HOA Compliance Department threatening thousands of dollars in fines for infractions, ranging from unsanctioned bird feeders to improper gravel. Hue on my driveway, then she got bold. One crisp morning, I was heading to the barn when I saw a flash of color near the paddock. It was Karen inside my fenced property line, using her phone to take pictures of Athena and Hera. "Ms. Whitfield!" I called out, making sure my voice was loud enough for the camera mounted on the nearby fence post to pick up. "You are trespassing. Please leave my property immediately." She turned, a triumphant smirk on her face, utterly unabashed. "These animals are not registered with the HOA Livestock Committee. According to our bylaws, each unregistered large animal incurs a $500 fine per day." She said it with the rehearsed cadence of someone who relished wielding these imaginary rules. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice lethally even. "There is no HOA Livestock Committee that has any jurisdiction here. This is your second and final warning. You need to leave now, or I will be calling the county sheriff's department." "Go right ahead," she sneered, her eyes glinting with malicious confidence. "Sheriff Thompson is my brother-in-law. Let's see how that phone call goes for you." But I didn't make the call, not yet. Instead, I went back to my office and meticulously logged the event. Time, date, a description of her actions, and a link to the high-definition video file. I was building a dossier, a digital monument to her hubris. Every trespass, every fake notice, every threatening voicemail she left on my machine, it was all preserved. What Karen Whitfield, in her myopic world of petty power, failed to comprehend was that I wasn't just some random guy who'd bought a ranch. My day job, the one that had paid for this sanctuary, was as the Senior Vice President of Development for Pinnacle Property Group. And Pinnacle Property Group held the master contract for all of Willowbrook HOA's legal services, financial management, and property oversight. In the very specific ecosystem she thought she ruled, I wasn't a subject. I was part of the environment. The final straw for her seemed to be my continued refusal to register my horses with her fictional committee. That's when she decided to escalate, to bring the full weight of the law down upon what she believed was a vulnerable target. She picked up the phone and called 911, reporting a dangerous trespasser on the old Miller Ranch. So now, here I stood, in my own driveway, surrounded by the flashing lights her lie had summoned. The lead officer's expression shifted subtly as he returned from his patrol car, having run my license. The hard edge of suspicion was gone, replaced by a weary professionalism. "Mr. Chen, I apologize for the confusion. Everything checks out. You're clearly the legal owner of this property. We'll be having a serious conversation with Ms. Whitfield about the consequences of filing a false report." "Officer, before you do that," I said, holding up a hand, "I believe I can provide some crucial context." I walked over to the porch and retrieved my laptop from the table. With a few clicks, I queued up a curated selection of video clips. For the past 2 weeks, I've been documenting a sustained campaign of harassment and illegal trespass by Ms. Whitfield. I think you'll want to see this. For the next 20 minutes, the officers gathered around the screen, their faces illuminated by the glow of the playback. They watched in stony silence as the evidence unfolded. Karen trespassing to photograph the horses. Karen leaving fake violation notices. Karen standing on my porch issuing threats, her voice crisp and clear on the audio. With each clip, their posture stiffened. This was no longer just a bad tip. It was a pattern of criminal behavior. "Mr. Chen," the lead officer said when the last video concluded, his voice now carrying a note of grim resolve. "This is compelling evidence. Would you like to press formal charges for harassment and criminal trespass?" I considered it for a long moment, then offered a slight, calculated smile. "Let me make a phone call first, officer. I believe there's a larger, systemic issue here that needs to be addressed at the source." I pulled my personal phone from my pocket and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Janet, it's Marcus Chen," I said into the receiver. My tone calm but firm, the tone I used in boardrooms. "I need you and Richard from HR to come out to my ranch immediately." "Yes, right now. We've got a significant situation involving one of our contracted HOA board members." I paused, letting the gravity sink in. "Yes, Karen Whitfield from Willowbrook. She just filed a false police report against me, claiming I'm a trespasser on my own land." There was a sharp, audible intake of breath on the other end of the line. Janet, the unflappable president of our property management division, was flapped. "We're on our way, Mr. Chen. 30 minutes. I am so very sorry this is happening." While we waited, I walked the officers through the physical evidence, the stack of fake violation notices, the threatening letters all printed on official-looking HOA letterhead. They took photographs, made copies, and filled out their notepads with meticulous detail. Right on time, a sleek sedan appeared at the end of my driveway, followed by a second, more utilitarian company car. To my complete lack of surprise, Karen Whitfield was in the back of the lead car. Janet had clearly picked her up from her home under the clever pretense of an urgent, off-site HOA board meeting to discuss emergent legal issues. The look on Karen's face when she stepped out and saw the assembled police cruisers was a complex tapestry of emotions. First, pure confusion, then a dawning, cold dread as her eyes scanned the scene. And when her gaze finally landed on me, standing calmly beside the lead officer, her expression curdled into a potent mix of outrage and sheer, unadulterated panic. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice trembling as she strode forward, attempting to reclaim control. "Janet, why have you brought me to this violator's property? What is going on?" Janet stepped forward, her usual warm demeanor replaced by a countenance of cold-forged steel. "Ms. Whitfield, are you aware that Mr. Marcus Chen is the Senior Vice President of Development for Pinnacle Property Group?" The color drained from Karen's face so completely it was as if someone had pulled a plug. Her jaw went slack. That's impossible," she stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He's just some guy who bought a rundown ranch." "A ranch," Richard from Human Resources cut in, his voice like a razor, "that, as we have confirmed, sits entirely outside of the Willowbrook HOA's jurisdiction. Yet, According to this extensive documentation, you have been systematically harassing him, trespassing on his property, and now, we are told, you have filed a false police report. Do you have any conception of the legal and professional ramifications of your actions? Karen's voice was a shaky, desperate thing now. I was just doing my job. Protecting property values, the HOA board voted unanimously to expand our authority. I have the meeting minutes. I have documentation. No, you don't, Karen, Janet interrupted, her voice cold and final. I've already spoken with the entire board by phone on my drive here. There was no vote. There was no motion. You acted entirely on your own initiative, grossly abusing your position to harass and intimidate a homeowner, and, as it turns out, a senior executive of the company that manages your HOA. This ends. Right now! The lead officer chose that moment to step forward, his presence a solid, official anchor in the surreal conversation. Miss Whitfield, filing a false police report is a Class B misdemeanor in this state. You knowingly reported a fictional emergency, wasting valuable law enforcement resources and potentially diverting them from actual emergencies. I am citing you for false reporting and for harassment. He began to write out the ticket. This is ridiculous, Karen sputtered, her eyes wide with disbelief, the last vestiges of her composure crumbling. You can't do this! I know people! My brother-in-law is the sheriff. Former sheriff, the officer corrected her evenly, not even looking up from his citation book. He retired 3 years ago. Ma'am, you are looking at a penalty of up to 6 months in county jail and a $5,000 fine for the false report alone. That does not include any civil penalties Mr. Chen may decide to pursue against you personally. Richard cleared his throat, stepping closer, his HR demeanor fully engaged. Miss Whitfield, effective immediately, you are terminated from your position on the Willowbrook HOA board. Pinnacle Property Group is severing all professional ties with you. Furthermore, pursuant to the indemnity clause in our management contract, you will be held personally liable for any and all legal fees incurred by Mr. Chen and by our company as a direct result of your fraudulent actions. You can't do this to me, Karen cried, her voice rising to a shrill, desperate pitch. I've been the HOA president for 8 years. The neighborhood needs my leadership. They depend on me. The neighborhood, Janet said, her voice firm and resonant in the quiet evening, needs someone who understands and follows the law. A security team will arrive at your home tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to collect all HOA property, laptops, financial files, key fobs, correspondence, everything. If you attempt to access any HOA digital system, bank account, or physical property after today, you will be facing additional criminal charges for unauthorized access and theft. The reality of her situation finally hit her, a physical blow. Her shoulders slumped, the defiant posture collapsing inward. The clipboard, the symbol of her authority that she had clutched like a lifeline, slipped from her numb fingers and hit the gravel with a dull, final thud. But I was just trying to maintain community standards, she whispered, the words feeble and hollow. By harassing law-abiding property owners and inventing rules out of thin air? I asked, my voice calm but carrying clearly in the still air. By abusing the small, volunteer-based authority you were given and turning it into a personal dictatorship? That's not maintaining standards, Ms. Whitfield. That's tyranny. The officer finished writing and handed her the folded citation. Miss Whitfield, you'll receive a court date in the mail from the county clerk. I strongly advise you to retain legal counsel. And be advised, he added, locking eyes with her, this citation includes a restraining order. If you come within 500 feet of Mr. Chen or any part of his property line, you will be arrested on the spot for violation of a court order. As the officers escorted her, stunned and silent, back toward Janet's car, she was muttering under her breath, a stream of barely audible grievances about unfairness, ingratitude, and how no one understood her vision for a perfect, controlled community. But the truth, cold and unyielding, had finally caught up with Karen Whitfield. She was facing criminal charges, thousands of dollars in fines, the complete and utter loss of the petty authority she had wielded and abused for years, and the financial ruin of being personally sued. Janet turned back to me. her face softening with a profound embarrassment. "Mr. Chen, I can't even begin to tell you how sorry I am about this. This is an egregious failure on our part. We will be conducting a full, top-to-bottom review of every single decision, fine, and rule change Karen Whitfield enacted during her presidency. I expect we will be reversing quite a few of her creative interpretations of the bylaws." "I appreciate that, Janet," I said, nodding. "My main concern is that the next board president fully understands that their authority is contractual, not imperial. It has limits. Make sure they know what those limits are." When the cars finally pulled away, their headlights cutting long paths through the dark, a profound silence descended once more upon the ranch. The intrusive red and blue reflections faded. From my windows and the familiar, gentle sounds of the night returned. I picked up my now cold coffee, walked back to the porch, and sat down. In the distance, silhouetted against the starry sky, Athena and Hera grazed peacefully. They were unregistered, unbothered, and blissfully unaware that they had been the unwitting catalysts in a ridiculous high-stakes power struggle. 3 weeks later, 2 letters arrived in my mailbox. The first was on heavy, formal stationery from the district attorney's office. It confirmed that Karen Whitfield, upon advice of her counsel, had pled no contest to the charges of filing a false report and criminal harassment. Her sentence was 6 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, to be served at a city park, not her chosen HOA, a $5,000 statutory fine, and a court-ordered restitution of $8,000 to cover my legal fees and time. The second letter was from the newly elected interim Willowbrook HOA board. It was a formal written apology for the egregious actions and profound overreach of the previous administration. They wrote that their internal investigation, aided by a forensic accountant, had uncovered that Karen had been systematically abusing her position for years. She had been creating fictitious rules and committees, levying fines for non-existent violations, and funneling the money into a separate bank account that only she controlled. The forensic accountants were still untangling the entire mess, but early findings suggested she had embezzled close to $50,000 during her 8-year reign as president. I set both letters aside on my desk and stepped out into the warm morning sun. My horses lifted their heads briefly from their grazing, their ears twitching toward me, then returned to their breakfast. They didn't know or care about HOA politics, embezzlement, or fallen dictators. They were just happy to be horses, free in their field. Sometimes, I reflected, the most effective way to deal with a bully isn't to fight them head-on. Sometimes you just have to get out of their way, document everything, and let them swing. So wildly and so high that they end up hitting something much, much bigger and more solid than they ever expected. In Karen's case, she had swung at what she thought was a simple, isolated ranch owner and had instead hit her boss's boss, bringing the full weight of corporate and criminal justice down upon herself. The last I heard through the corporate grapevine, she had sold her house at a loss and moved 2 states away to live with a reluctant sister. Her reputation in Willowbrook was in ruins, her meticulously managed HOA kingdom reduced to ashes, all because she couldn't resist the temptation to try and intimidate the wrong person. Her combined $13,000 in fines and legal fees became an expensive public lesson in the nature of true authority and the inescapable reality of accountability. It was definitive proof that power, when wielded without integrity, always comes with a price.